Before We Leave is the debut release from indie dev Balancing Monkey Games, styled as a non-violent, tile-based civilization builder. Several members of WSB are big fans of games such as Banished and the Civ series, so this one piqued our interest. But how does it compare? Before We Leave puts you in your own little corner of the universe, tasked with, well, expanding. Having spent generations underground to avoid galactic annihilation, your population has regressed to a Stone Age level of technology, capable of little more than building basic huts and growing potatoes. This requires you to send your peeps out in search of the ancient technology left by your forebearers to build bigger and better. This comes with its own risks, however. The game may stylize itself as non-violent, but it seems that the local denizens may have missed that memo. From kleptomaniac goblins, temperamental automatons, and planet-consuming space whales, you face plenty of opposition as you progress. The controls are immediately familiar, with sensible decisions such as dragging with right-click or using WASD to move around the map, and page up and page down for zooming for those who lack a mouse wheel, with an interface that's clean and easy to make sense of. This took no tutorial for me to work out and to become familiar with, although the game does feature a tutorial section. Diving into this, it does a good job of going through what each thing does and how the features work. It doesn't give you everything, with the later parts of the tutorial requiring you to think on what you've learnt thus far. For example, it tells you to build an iron mine, but it doesn't tell you that you need to research it first, prompting you to think for a moment. This is a good thing, in our view. Another welcome feature is the existence of an old-school tech tree. Find resources which give the relevant tech type to research prerequisites before being able to get the next thing. It's not as extensive as, say, Kerbal Space Program or Stellaris, but it's enough to add an extra layer to the game. You can't speed through this, however, as you will not be able to find anything but the first 2 tech resources on your first planet. Which brings me onto this game's unique difference, being that you aren't restricted to a single planet, rather a solar system. This helps emphasise the challenge that the game adds in that resources are not automatically shared between islands, let alone planets, requiring you to manage trade routes both continentally and interplanetarily. This is further complicated by the limited resources available on some planets, requiring the use of others to act as feeders whilst balancing their own upkeeps. Outside of this, however, when compared with other games such as these mechanics are somewhat shallow in places. The ability to prioritise certain tasks is here, but is somewhat basic with a high, low, and neutral for each building. There is no management window to control job necessity, and peeps cannot be assigned to a specific task. Whilst they have their own little flavour text, such as Roger, who likes to haunt his neighbours when he's bored, or Jane, who's totally not an anthropomorphic wolf in disguise, there is little depth to them as individuals, seeming more like one big hive mind than a population, though I suppose a few millennia in a cave might just do that to a species. There is also no real consequence to things going wrong. If I have a lack of food on a specific island, I don't lose peeps, rather they just refuse to work. If things go really wrong, it's not an unsurmountable task to recover. Because of this, I felt no concern leaving the game running at 4 times speed in the background whilst I wrote this review, a distinct opposition to games such as Banished, where honestly I'm scared to sneeze even when the game's at normal pace. To some, this may seem like a major flaw, whilst to others, this may be a good thing. This lack of challenge, for us here at least, does make the game somewhat less appealing. That's not to say it's not enjoyable. Before sitting down to write this review, I myself spent a solid 8 hours playing this game through to the end, and never once felt the desire to just walk away. However, now that I have completed a single run, I don't feel the need to jump back in for another try to do better. But how does the game look? This isn't a graphical masterpiece, with a somewhat stylised and blocky appearance, but it can't be denied that the game is very pretty. Whilst buildings don't have multiple models possible, meaning that all houses look the same for example, the developers have done a good job at making them stand out and easy to spot against other building types. Sound-wise, it's a similar story. There aren't many different songs you will hear, but what you do hear is enjoyable, very well composed, and appropriate to whatever you're looking at or whatever's happening at the time. Zooming into a town square will make the music louder, with it fading as you zoom out or pan away. These town squares do sound like town squares too, with an ambient hustle and bustle added in over the sounds from your smithies or forges, adding a nice layer of realism. Overall, Before We Leave is an okay game, and with its friendlier approach, may well be a good entry into the world of civilization builders for those who'd rather shy away from the harsh realities that some such titles bestow. It scores 6.5 out of 10 from us, and at £16, it's reasonably enough price that to those looking to get into these games, we could say go for it. Just bear in mind that it will likely be relegated to the archives of your library after a few playthroughs at most. If, however, you're after a more in-depth experience, this may be one to avoid. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.